Hello, welcome everyone. We are just starting to let people in. We'll give it a minute while participants join. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I just mentioned we'll give it a few seconds before we get started. So while we give it a few minutes for people to join, grab a coffee, maybe fill up your water, because in a little bit we're going to dive in and get very intentional and strategic for the next little bit. And if you can, drop in the chat or in the Q&A where you're joining us from too, because I think we have some nice representation for our session today, so we can see where everyone's calling in from while we wait for people to join. Marina Del Rey, California, Orange County, Utah, ooh, Nigeria, um, Monrovia, Colorado, Houston, Texas. Oh my gosh, we've got some great representation. San Diego, Chicago, Milwaukee. I am in Milwaukee too. Hi, Mary. Let's see here. Alberta, Canada, Torrance, California. All right, we've got some nice geographical representation here. It's wonderful to have all of you with us today. Beautiful. We have lots of Southern California representation. I hope you're all enjoying a beautiful sunny morning this morning. Alabama, amazing. All right. Well, it looks like we have some pretty good representation this morning, and we still have a few people joining, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So, hello to everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Samantha Blakeley, but you can call me Sam, as you see on this slide. And I am the Vice President of Business Development for Leaderology. And I'm truly excited to be spending this time with all of you today because as HR business partners, you play a critical and strategic role in your organizations. And your meetings with your internal stakeholders are an incredible opportunity to multiply your impact, especially during times like the ones that we're navigating right now, where every single meeting and every single interaction really offers a chance to add value and insight and an opportunity to shift behaviors in a way that moves the business forward. And so that is what we are going to be discussing together today. And so to start us off, I would really love to just do some level setting on the current state of affairs. And so we'll start off with a little bit of reflection. When you think about your current conversations with your internal clients in your one-on-ones, how many hours a week would you say you're spending speaking with those clients? And so again, we can actually have you drop those in the Q&A too. And we'll just get a little bit of an assessment of the current state of affairs with how many hours we're currently spending with our internal clients. So I'll give it a minute, let the responses roll in. 3 to 4, 12, 6, okay, 10, around 5, 4 to 5. So we got a lot of 4 to 5, 10, 10 to 15, 25 plus from Mary, 4 to 5, 8 to 10, 25 to 30. Excellent. So we have a little bit of a range here. Some of you saying in the 4 to 5, 10 to 15, or even 20 to 25 plus, depending on your role in your organization. And I think that makes a lot of sense because each organization is different. Each context under which you're working within is different. But the truth is that regardless of whether it's 4 to 5 or 25 to 30, a big part of your weeks are spent with your internal clients in your one-on-ones, which means that we have a real opportunity here to show up in a way that elevates your role as HR business partners because what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our partners is that there's really a shift taking place in the HR business partner role. And it's a really important evolution in how the HR business partner role is really changing for the modern times and ultimately for the needs of your clients and for your respective organizations. And so, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's unpack a little bit exactly what this shift looks like. And so, if you were to really consider the role of an HR business partner today, how you might describe the elements of that role really depends on which playbook you're looking at. And so, if we think about the old playbook, that would really be a place where the HRBP role appears a little more transactional. So, an HR business partner is looked to as the problem solver or the partner who comes in to clean up the mess when situations go awry. And so, in this case, under the old playbook, we might show up in response as perhaps a little more reactive than anticipating and focused on those just in time solutions, those conversations that are happening right now that we're working on solving for what's urgent and for what's most efficient. And perhaps it's a little more update focused. So the one on ones are perhaps a little more focused on play by plays from the leader, which don't get me wrong, is helpful for sure to stay informed. But what that means is that these check ins are rarely developmental because the conversations really become focused on fixing the problems at hand or the things that are taking place at face value, the it, if you will, rather than exploring the why that really lies beneath that. However, if we look at the modern playbook, which has certainly been scripted even more so following the pandemic, this really presents the HR business partner as a driver of strategic value, where they appear in that role as a true coach for their internal clients. And so in this case, HR business partners are really proactive. They're not waiting for the fire drill. They're spotting what's coming next and they're thinking about how they can respond to this even before it hits their inbox or before the escalation takes place. And they're really serving as those strategic mirrors placed on those winding roads and anticipating for their internal clients what's coming around the corner if they continue down a certain path. They're also really focused on connecting the dots for those patterns and behavior and the impact and the ripple effects that it might have on their teams. And they're really good at turning data into meaningful dialogue. In fact, I was in a session yesterday with several learning leaders talking about how do we think about the data we have, how we can present that to leaders in a way that's really compelling so that we can have a meaningful dialogue and engage in a meaningful conversation around what this data means. And so these modern HR business partners are helping leaders see the why behind the numbers and the situation and the things that are coming across their desk every single day, which means that they're ultimately operating at a very strategic level. They're thinking beyond the tasks or the fixes, and they're very intentionally working with leaders to shape their behaviors and how those behaviors are influencing performance and culture on their respective teams. And so I'm going to ask for you all to be a little fearlessly authentic with me right now. And for the purposes of this reflection exercise with yourself, and my lovely colleague Natalie is actually going to put a poll on the screen for us. So for the purposes of this poll, think about the one-on-one meetings that you've had with your business leaders in the last month. Where did they tend and trend? Were they more transactional? Were they more transformational? Think about how they might land within these two boxes and put that note in the poll. All right, so we'll give it a little bit and let some responses roll in. All right. So give it maybe another 20 seconds or so. So take some time and just, it doesn't have to be perfect or all of the time. If you just had to pick one within the last month, where would you say? Were they more transactional or more transformational? All right. It looks like we've got some pretty good representation, Natalie. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the results. All right. So we can see that it's a pretty good split. We have a little bit heavier towards those of you saying that your one-on-ones within the last month have been more transactional, but also a good handful of you that are saying they have ended up in that more transformational bucket. And so this is really helpful because as we think about shifting from the way we're showing up to have those conversations being more transactional versus more transformational, this is a really great reflection exercise because the truth is that each one-on-one really is an opportunity to show up in that more transformational box, that more proactive, more strategically focused box. And this is a really critical opportunity to help the business both see and understand the role of HR business partners, not just as just-in-time problem solvers, but also in the role as that strategic and proactive coach so they can really lean on all of the intel and the expertise and the insight that you bring in your role as an HR business partner. And of course, we all know that this is certainly the ideal state, but how exactly do we get there? How do we go about making that shift for those of us that might still be playing a little bit more in the transactional box? And the way that we can do that actually starts with mindset. And so, not just with the mindset of the leaders that we're working with every single day, but also our own mindsets every single time we go into those one on ones and we prepare to connect with our internal business leaders. And so, in order for these meetings to start to evolve and shift towards that modern playbook, that more transformational HR business partner role, we also have to shift how we see the meeting. And so, before going into the meeting, there are certainly some things you can affirm and ask yourself on the topic of, are you just getting updates or are you really intentionally shaping leadership behaviors? Are you seeing yourself as there to not just support, but also challenge leaders' thinking and how they're showing up, how they're approaching challenges, how they're partnering and working with their teams? And are you not just showing up to be a solver of their problems, but are you taking those opportunities when these problems are coming across your desk in partnership with these leaders to strategically coach them, to use it as an opportunity to elevate their thinking, to help them elevate their leadership? And so ultimately, what are the things we can do with intentionality in these meetings to shift both how we ourselves, but also these leaders are seeing their one-on-ones. So we don't leave another meeting with a leader feeling like, okay, great, we just talked for 45 minutes and I'm probably going to have the same conversation again within the month. Of course, we've all been there, but if we can start to think about how we're evolving our mindsets going into these meetings, that's where we can really start to shift the outcomes too. And so again, with this shift in mindset, we're really working on shifting the tone, which ultimately has the downstream effects of shifting the outcomes and how those leaders are showing up for the business too. And this is where you all, as HR business partners, bring tremendous value in these one-on-ones that both moves the business forward and also expands the leader's field of vision in terms of how they're operating within their role too. And so, of course, once we are able to shift our own mindsets, that's where we can really start to shift theirs being the leaders, where we're helping them evolve their own thinking and how they see themselves and how they see their teams and their impact. And this is incredibly important for the business because if we think about what today's mid-level leaders are facing, these mid-level leaders being the ones who are the shoulders of the entire organization, they're the ones that are getting the direction from the top, taking and hearing the feedback and the response, and getting the questions from those who report to them. They're facing some really significant challenges right now because they're managing through things like constant change through reorganizations, hybrid teams, new technology, AI upon AI upon AI, and tighter budgets. And this is true across industries, across organizations. And this is all happening while they are expected to deliver results, to inspire engagement, to navigate uncertainty, all while being asked to do more with even less at the same time. And again, this is a very significant challenge because, as you all know, many of these leaders were promoted for being great doers. They know how to do the work, they know how to do it with excellence, and they ultimately know how to run the business. However, they don't always know how to bring people along with them. And all of this is true, But what's also true is that all of you on this call are in the people business. And it's why we all do what we do, because we know just how critical it is for leaders to be able to bring people along with them. And this is where you all come in as those strategic HR business partners to add incredible value when you're coaching and when you're developing them. Because when our clients call us to coach these leaders, it's not because they need technical expertise. Often they are extremely technically brilliant and skilled. It's really because they need help with the people side. And this is where you all shine because you all have incredible influence and you sit right at that intersection and you see the leaders' blind spots. You see the team's dynamics. You know and understand the organizational pressures and you can really help them widen their field of vision from short term, what's immediately in front of them at the moment, to long term leadership impact. You know what they need. You know what they need to be successful and what they need to elevate their leadership. And so, if we take a minute just to reflect on the greatest needs that we are all collectively seeing in our leaders today, we're going to pop another poll up for you just so we can visualize this. But what skills or behaviors would you say you most want the leaders in your client groups to develop at the moment? So, take a minute, reflect on it. And then, of course, there might be multiple, but pick the one that's top of mind for you at this moment for your leaders in your organizations. All right. We'll give it about a minute to get some responses here. Take a sip of water while you're all submitting your responses. All right. We're getting some good responses. I'm going to give it maybe another 30 seconds just because we're still getting a decent amount of responses here. And then we'll share the poll. All right. I think we can go ahead and share the poll if you wouldn't mind, Natalie. Excellent. Okay. So we'll just read through this for a little bit here. We have some pretty good representation across many of these skills, but a few that are jumping out right now as the most popular are going to be accountability. So how are these mid-level leaders holding their teams accountable? Another big one is change leadership. We're hearing that quite a bit with our partners right now. The level of change, the pace of change, it is extremely significant. And many of these mid-level leaders perhaps don't have that experience or that skill set in engaging their stakeholders and bringing their teams along in the change. That's a really big one too. Coaching, absolutely. A lot of mid-level leaders are not necessarily proficient in how do they coach and develop their teams and elevate them to the next level um, of their development journey. Emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence and psychological safety, those are huge and foundational for every single team. And you'll hear us say a lot at Leaderology, show me a great leader and I'll show you someone who is self-aware. These are absolutely huge for leaders to be able to cultivate that self-awareness. And it's a challenge for a lot of leaders who haven't built that muscle doing that. Giving feedback, absolutely giving feedback. We all know it's challenging. It's really challenging. It's really difficult. So how can we get our mid-level leaders comfortable with that? Performance management too. Okay, excellent. Thank you all for sharing. There's a lot of consistency and also a lot of different areas where our mid-level leaders are needing our support. And so, of course, the next question becomes, if we know this to be true, if we know these are all of the key skills that mid-level leaders need right now, that our organizations need to be able to support them in developing, what is stopping us? What are those barriers and what is really getting in the way of mid-level leaders from shifting these behaviors, especially because this is such a crucial segment of leadership for our organization. As we said earlier, Your mid-level leaders are the shoulder. So what's getting in the way? And so we'd love to leave this, use this as another moment to get fearlessly authentic. And we actually have a Slido. So for those of you who haven't used Slido, it's kind of like a virtual whiteboard. And if you scan the QR code, you can actually type in your responses for the barriers that you're seeing today in your own organizations that are preventing leaders from developing those skills. And so again, scan the QR code and then you can start to type, and we'll actually see the responses popping up here in real time of the barriers that we're all currently experiencing across our organizations with getting our leaders to model these behaviors. Lack of resources, lack of awareness that they need to develop these skills. Absolutely. Lack of a growth mindset, 100%. Yes, time to develop these skills while having to meet KPIs, 100%. Resistance to change, not understanding the impact they can have. That's so true. Like just how much this is important for their role. Too tactical, lack of accountability. They don't know what they don't know. Fear of being unliked, fear. Yes, 100%. Lack of accountability, lack of experience. Training isn't tied to the business. 100%. We give training on these things, but don't help them see how it's tied to the business and their work. Time management. Yep. Resistance to change and old school mentality, 100%. Another resistance to change, too. Excellent. Too much in the weeds. Resistance to change, a long time in the company without this type of changes. Don't have time to step away. Yep, time's coming up a lot. Reinforcement of the training. Absolutely. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Not knowing how to bridge between knowing they should and knowing how. Absolutely. So you learn all of these things and you might go in with the best of intentions, but how you actually apply that, how you actually use that in your day-to-day, that's a different challenge that a lot of leaders struggle with. Not self-aware, lack awareness. Yeah. Self-awareness is a huge element of really effective leadership, and a lot of leaders do struggle with that. I've always done it this way. Yeah. How do we get them to kind of see the value of shifting those behaviors and how that influences how they're showing up for their team and for the business? Okay, perfect. Thank you all for taking the time to submit that. If you can see, this is what I love about Slido too. It puts some themes at the top. What we're really seeing is we have a lot of barriers around the time for these mid-level leaders. So again, we've talked about it. They are really getting squeezed, the middle manager squeeze between the top and those who report to them. And that creates a very real time constraint for them to be able to not just respond, but think very intentionally and strategically about these things. They might feel like they lack the skills. So again, they're very technically skilled. They are very skilled in the business, but leading people is an entirely different thing. And if you haven't had the chance to build that muscle, the chance to kind of really develop your own leadership, that can be really challenging, especially if you lack self-awareness. So the third item, if you don't have that awareness of how you're showing up, especially when you're stressed and you're resource constrained and you're navigating change and all the things, that's a huge challenge too, in addition to some resistance as well. So thank you all for participating. That is super helpful. And again, everything that we were talking about and that you were talking about is exactly right. What we hear from our clients all the time is that training without reinforcement, so without that application, understanding how to apply the skills, it really just fades, because if you don't know how to actually translate these things into your role, it becomes very difficult to incorporate them and make real impact from what you've learned. And even if you have coaching, even if you have an incredible coach, someone who is helping you maybe drive that self-awareness, but you don't have that structure to think about, how am I taking the insights from what I'm learning through the training, what I'm learning through my coaching, and applying that with some level of structure and accountability. Lack of accountability was coming up quite a bit as well. It can lack the depth. It can lack that application to actually really begin to shift these behaviors. And the truth is that these leaders do need both to have real transformation. These mid-level leaders, they need training that meets them where they're at and delivers just-in-time learning that can be readily absorbed and then applied. and they need your coaching. They need that individualized, timely, and relevant support that helps them take these concepts from being words or models on a page or on a website to things that they can actually incorporate into their day-to-day conversations and responsibilities. And this right here is how you can really turn every one-on-one into a catalyst for leadership growth. Because if we all know what's getting in the way of developing them, if these are the skills that leaders need the most, then every one-on-one is a chance to build them, to help equip them to be able to model these skills and these behaviors. And again, this is where you all have extraordinary influence, not just in managing performance, but in shaping leadership behavior for your internal clients in real time. And one of the most powerful places that you all have the unique opportunity to do this, it's not in a classroom, it's in the one-on-ones that you're all having with your leaders today. Because if the playbook and the vision for the modern HR business partner is one where we're acting as internal coaches, then every single one-on-one becomes a checkpoint to discuss insights and apply learning and reflect and really prompt that self-awareness. And that's where you can help leaders build their leader action plan, where they need to focus their efforts and achieve their results and expand their skills. And that's really an opportunity to challenge their thinking and help them elevate their leadership. And in your one-on-ones, you're not just doing this in theory. It's not a simulation or a case study. You are getting the benefit of real-time relevancy because you're working with them in real time on real challenges with the real context in their ecosystem. And that's your superpower as their internal HR coaches, because leaders need to develop these skills and they need to be coached in real time through their development. And that's where you all have an incredible opportunity to make real impact in these one-on-one conversations. And when training gives them the tools, your coaching is what helps them apply these tools in those messy, real world leadership moments where the growth, the evolution, the shift in behavior actually happens. And the power of training combined with individualized structured coaching is exactly why we built Pathways. And so Pathways is an immersive development experience supported with one-on-one leadership coaching that is very intentionally designed to help business leaders master those skills that matter most. And so with each of the three pathways, the learning journey applies targeted skill building supported with your expertise in coaching to ensure leaders are not just learning concepts, but that they're applying them in ways that are actually transforming how they lead. And of course, in true leaderology style, we have made the learning very compelling and binge-worthy and self-paced so that leaders can truly engage with the content and not just click through the training so they can get back to all of the other things that are demanding their attention in the moment. And then through the best practices that we talked about today, you bring it home to support them in driving true behavior change in your one-on-ones. And that's exactly what the Pathway Certified Partner Track does. It is a certification program for you all as HR leaders that gives you the framework as well as the resources to build fearlessly authentic and strategic and agile mid-level leaders within your own organizations. And there's no coaching certification required, just your own HR expertise and your business acumen that you're already bringing to the business every single day. And again, we talked a little bit earlier about the skills and the behaviors we'd like to see from our mid-level leaders. And many of these are covered in the Pathways curriculum. So things like emotional intelligence, psych safety, delegation and accountability, leading through change was a really big one. Coaching for development was a really big one. How do we help them build teams, give feedback, effective feedback, most importantly, manage key stakeholders, elevate performance, and so much more, which means that through these training modules and e-learnings, we are delivering the transformational coaching through your coaching and also hitting on the skills that leaders need most to elevate their development. And while we can certainly come in and deliver pathways within organizations, what I personally love about the Certified Partner Program is it allows you all as the internal experts to deliver the Leaderology experience. So best in class, fully supported transformational development in-house. And we know that you all are incredibly busy, especially headed into the end of the year and navigating the pace and the scale of change and uncertainty that we're dealing with every single day. So the Certified Partner Program is very specifically designed to empower internal HR leaders like yourselves with everything you need to begin embedding these best practices into your one-on-ones and development programs with your leaders almost immediately. And so if we think about the certification training, it's live training, it's fast, just 5 hours for your first pathway and 2 for every additional pathway, meaning that you'll be ready to start incorporating this within weeks. It's not like a months-long certification journey that you're looking at. And you're going to get full access to the pathways content. So you'll get to familiarize yourself with the content. When you begin deploying it to your leaders, you'll see how they're progressing through with real-time data. And you'll also get real-time practice. So as part of the certification, you'll get breakouts, behavioral assessments, and teachbacks to really build your confidence with the coaching element and the material. And we're not just going to give you access and wish you well. You will be fully supported with a leaderology team, with a coach, office hours, and dedicated platform support to make sure you can really embed this and scale this within your own organizations with excellence very quickly as well. And so we are going to drop a link in the Q&A if you want to learn more. But ultimately, our goal is to help you turn every one-on-one with your business leaders into a catalyst for leadership growth. And again, the reality here is that there is an immense opportunity to begin multiplying your impact by not just shifting your own mindset, but using that to ultimately shift leadership behaviors. And so again, we'll leave you all today to consider how you might begin incorporating this mindset shift from the old playbook to the new playbook into your approach with a few critical questions to turn your next one-on-one into a true transformational coaching moment. And as HR business partners, you're often in the best position to ask the questions of these leaders that no one else will. You know, you have their trust, you know their business, you know what they're dealing with. And this is a real opportunity to ask questions that get a leader from reacting to really reflecting on the things that they're dealing with every single day. And these are the kinds of questions that shift a one-on-one from a check-in to a true coaching moment that elevates their leadership. And so you certainly don't need to ask all of these. Sometimes it's just asking one really great question at the right moment that can get a leader thinking differently. But we did want to give you all some questions that you can go back and take into your one-on-ones that can really help elevate your conversations and move them into that more transformational bucket. And so as an example, if you want to coach a leader on something like how they are prioritizing, you might ask question 3, where do you see untapped potential on your team that you're not leveraging yet? Where could you maybe tap into someone who can help delegate and prioritize? Or if you want to assess their courage, as an example, you might ask them, if you knew this situation wouldn't fail, what would you try? What would you do that could really help move the business forward? So again, there's several here that we wanted to share with you, and feel free to snap a picture of these and keep them in your back pocket. And maybe next time you're in a one-on-one, just pick one and see how it goes and ask the question, really elevate those conversations and see how quickly your conversation moves from more update focus to real insights that are helping drive development for your internal leaders. So again, if you're familiar with Leaderology, you hear us say all the time, you have got this and we have always got you. We are always here to support, to be a thought partner any way that we can. And I just want to thank you all for your time and your attention and trust today. And with that, I'm going to close us with a QR code that provides additional information on our Pathways Certified Partner Program if you're interested to learn more. And then I wanted to leave our last 5 to 10 minutes or so to open it up for questions or comments. So I am going to pull up the chat and answer any questions or comments that you might have that we can answer during our time together. All right, let's see here. Anonymous, how can I get my leaders to see me this way? That's a great question. And I think it goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, too. If we start shifting how we're showing up in terms of our mindset for those conversations. So if we're very intentionally going into a conversation, knowing that it tends to get more technical, it tends to get more problem focused. If we kind of shift how we're showing up to say, you know what? Yes, I need to support these leaders in understanding or in navigating these challenges, but I'm also going to really take the time to make sure I'm asking a strategic question, that I'm really digging in as their coach and their thought partner to help start elevating them. If you can start to do that with consistency, and it might not be right away, it might be once here, once there, really getting comfortable with that muscle. If you start showing up consistently for these leaders, and they start to then see the outcome of your coaching and how that's really transforming some of the challenges that maybe they're continually facing, or the challenges that are coming across their plate every day, that's where you can really start to elevate how your leaders are seeing you through the ultimate outcomes that are coming from these conversations. And so I would recommend, again, maybe incorporating some of those questions, and even just kind of tackling it piece by piece, one-on-one by one-on-one. It's not something that'll happen overnight, but if you can start to really shift that for even just one conversation or two, and you can do that with some consistency, I think that'll really support in elevating. Okay, let's see here. What's a good way to ask a deeper question when a leader is guarded? That's a really good question. We talked a little bit about psychological safety too. And that's huge, because if we just start jumping right into strategy when a leader's a little more guarded versus starting with psychological safety, coaching really only goes as deep as the level of trust allows. And if a leader is feeling guarded, it's usually because something isn't feeling safe in that moment. And so you can really start by even just modeling the vulnerability that you're seeking and naming what you're noticing. So you might say something like, I noticed you paused there. What's behind that? And start to dive in a little bit and meet leaders where they're at, and really surface what's going on with that empathy and that compassion in an effort to invite that openness that you're seeking. And if we can really focus on shifting the conversation from why to what and how, like what part of this feels the hardest? How do you usually handle situations like this? That helps keeps these conversations curious and safe and exploratory, to help leaders really retain their agency while still moving them towards the insight that you're seeking. Excellent. Okay. Another question. As a more strategic HRBP, how can you influence your team of fellow HR professionals to move towards this? At times, it feels like I'm the only one, and it makes it more difficult to truly make impactful change besides the leaders in my region. Amazing. So, well, this not amazing. That's an amazing question. Um, I mean, I think again, that's a difficult challenge too, because I'm not sure based on the question if these are your direct reports, or if these are kind of your fellow peers in your organization. But I think again, it starts with modeling the behavior you want to seek, because peers. Okay, excellent. So if you're modeling this behavior and you're showing up in the strategic way for your leaders, not only are your leaders going to start showing up more effectively, but their teams are going to start showing up in a different way too. And so, again, it's kind of the idea of the proof is in the pudding. If you're modeling this and it's showing up in the business outcomes, also, it could be something like what we were talking about with these leaders earlier, where maybe they just don't know how. If there's an opportunity to think about sharing some of your experience or your expertise or your knowledge to help elevate these leaders too, and help them see how, if we can show up more transformationally as opposed to more transactionally, how that can really elevate the work we're doing as an HR function too. I think that can really help as well. And sometimes that means bragging on yourself a little bit and touting your wins, like sharing and creating the narrative of, I was in this one-on-one working with this leader on XYZ. This is how I helped them self-discover, and this is the impact that it had on their team and the business. I think sometimes people just don't see the impact that that can have. And so if you can share those wins with your team so they can see, wow, look at the great work that this person is doing. How do I emulate that? That can be really helpful too. How can we measure if our one-on-ones are becoming more transformational and strategic? Incredible question. So, Of course, we don't want to just track whether the meetings are taking place, but what is changing because of the conversations that we're having as part of those meetings? And are they focused on alignment and growth and strategic priorities rather than tasks and updates? And so some leading indicators that you might be making the shifts that you're looking for. And I think this goes back to an earlier question around how do I start to get my leaders to see me this way? When you start shifting your behavior and shifting in how you're showing up for those leaders, also listen for some language shifts that are taking place in your conversation. So, are your leaders starting to move from reporting to reflection, where you know the conversation is becoming more strategic in nature? Are you noticing that they are demonstrating better decision making, fewer fire drills, they're delegating better, they're elevating better? Are you seeing their team is more aligned, they're being more proactive in their leadership? And you can also create an opportunity in your one-on-ones if you're starting to see some of these leading indicators to invite them to self-reflect too. How are they seeing the insights from these conversations adding value to the business? Those are some of the things that you can pay attention for to start to see that your conversations are evolving and moving in the more strategic direction. But it's a great question, Kimberly. Okay, what else do we have? Do we have anything else? Y'all are keeping me on my toes today. I love it. Excellent. What mindset shifts are essential for an HRBP who wants to move from support to strategy? That's a great question, Hugo. I think, and again, it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, but it can be really challenging to um, shift from a support to strategy mindset because there are very real business problems and challenges that we're solving every single day that are coming across our desk. And so I think as you're thinking about intentionally showing up as more strategic, again, even if you just start by looking at the things that are coming across in your conversations and thinking about, is there anything from a more strategic lens that I could be thinking about or doing that could potentially take what I'm noticing from these challenges? We talked a little bit about meaningful data. Is there a pattern emerging? Is there something I'm seeing every single day that I can advise my leaders from a strategic perspective to help address some of these challenges? And then also reflecting on potentially moments where maybe a leader is coming to you with a problem that they could potentially solve through their leadership or they could potentially address with their teams directly. Where can you maybe start to recognize some of your own inclinations to jump in and solve? And through your questioning, whether it's those questions or some other coaching questions as their coach, help them reflect on how they might start to solve those challenges, whether it be through a more strategic lens or shifting how they're showing up as a leader. These are all different things that we can start to incorporate when we're finding ourselves stuck in that support place to be more strategic advisors for those leaders too. Are you offering HRCI credits for the session today? I do not believe these are HRCI certified, but when we share the deck, we don't have certification for HRCI credits, but I will confirm. And when we share the deck, we can give confirmation too. If things go well with a specific initiative, what will I do next? If things don't go well, what will I do next? Are good strategic questions to be asking. I love that. Yeah, helping people kind of scenario plan and think through, okay, if I'm prepared for each of these outcomes, what will I do next? How am I thinking around the corner of what might be coming based on what happens with this specific initiative? Great call out. All right. I'll give it another minute if there's any other outstanding questions. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more in the chat, but as I mentioned earlier, You've got this. You all have got this. You all have the skill, the insight, the talent, the strategic business acumen to be able to make this shift. However, we are here to be your thought partners, your support in any way we can. And so if you have any other lingering questions that are on your mind or that pop up as you're reflecting on the content in the rest of the day today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, to any member of our team. We're here to support in any way we can. And we're always here to be a thought partner to all of you. And so with that, please feel free to reach out. And if no one has any other questions, we'll wrap today and just thank you again for your time and your great questions and your energy, and being willing to engage in this important conversation about how we can continue to elevate our leaders through these one-on-ones.